The sound of rifle fire cracked through the crisp autumn air as Emma Holloway ran frantically toward her family's homestead, her heart pounding against her ribs like a wild animal desperate to escape. Smoke billowed into the clear blue sky, a terrible beacon guiding her back to what she already knew would be devastation. The small farm that had been her refuge since her parents' passing just 2 summers ago was engulfed in flames, and the silhouettes of mounted men could be seen riding away through the valley. Emma's boots pounded against the packed earth of the road as she pushed herself harder, lungs burning with each desperate breath. She had only gone to town for supplies, a few hours at most. How could everything change so quickly? Her long auburn hair whipped behind her as she ran, tears streaming down her face. By the time she reached what remained of her property, the Outlaws were just specks on the horizon, and her humble home was nothing but a smoldering ruin. The small cabin her father had built with his own hands, the barn where she kept her livestock, the garden she had so carefully tended, all reduced to ash and charred wood. Emma fell to her knees in the dirt, her body shaking with sobs. The year was 1875, and life in the Oregon Territory was unforgiving even on the best days. Portland was growing quickly, but out here, 15 miles from town, the law was distant and justice often had to be sought by one's own hand. "No," she whispered, her voice breaking. "No, no, no." Her fingers dug into the soil, still warm from the blaze that had consumed everything she owned. The few chickens that had survived scattered nervously around the yard, and her horse, thankfully, had broken free from the burning stable and stood trembling beneath a tall oak at the edge of the property. A rustling from the tree line made her head snap up, her hand automatically reaching for the small revolver she kept in her skirt pocket, the one her father had insisted she learn to use. "Don't shoot, miss," came a deep voice, steady and calm. "I'm not here to hurt you." From the shadows emerged a tall figure, a man with broad shoulders and a weathered face partially hidden beneath the brim of a dusty brown hat. He kept his hands visible, one resting lightly on his belt near a holstered pistol, the other holding the reins of a magnificent black stallion. "Name's Samuel Xavier," he said, his blue eyes surveying the destruction with a grim expression. "I was tracking those men when I saw the smoke. Riker's gang, I reckon." Emma kept her pistol trained on him, though her hand shook visibly. "What do you want?" "Same as you, I expect," Samuel replied, taking a careful step forward. "Justice?" "You're a lawman?" Emma asked, noting his lack of a badge. Samuel shook his head, a hint of something dark flickering across his features. "No, madam, just a man with a score to settle with Riker and his boys." He glanced around at the devastation. "Seems like you've got one too now." Emma slowly lowered her gun, exhaustion suddenly washing over her. "They took everything," she whispered. Samuel nodded, his jaw tight. "They do that. Been cutting a path of destruction across 3 counties. He tied his horse to a nearby fence post that had somehow survived the fire and approached her with measured steps. "You got family nearby, miss?" "Holloway. Emma Holloway," she replied, standing and brushing ash from her skirt with as much dignity as she could muster. "And no, there's no one." Samuel's expression softened slightly. "Well, Miss Holloway, night's coming on fast. I can help you salvage what's left, set up some kind of shelter. Tomorrow I'll be tracking those men again." He paused, studying her face. "You're welcome to ride into town with me first, find somewhere safe to stay." Emma looked around at the ruins of her life, at the land that had been in her family for 2 generations. Her chin lifted defiantly. "This is my home, Mr. Xavier. I'm not leaving it." A hint of a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Didn't think you would." He removed his hat, revealing thick dark hair with a touch of silver at the temples. He wasn't young, perhaps in his early 30s, but his eyes held a sharpness that spoke of a man who missed little and forgot even less. "Then we'd best get to work before the light's gone." As the sun sank lower, Emma and Samuel salvaged what they could from the wreckage. A cast iron skillet, miraculously intact. A trunk containing some of her clothes, scorched but usable. Her father's old rifle, which had been hidden in a compartment beneath the floorboards. The fire had been hot enough to weaken the wood, exposing the hiding place. Samuel worked tirelessly, clearing debris and setting up a simple lean-to against the stone chimney, the only part of the house still standing. He unrolled his bedroll beneath it and insisted Emma take it while he prepared a small fire a safe distance away. "Those men," Emma said as they sat by the flames, eating a simple meal of beans Samuel had in his pack. "You called them Riker's gang. Who are they?" Samuel's face hardened. "Jackson Riker. Used to ride with the Confederate raiders during the war." After it ended, he found he had a taste for violence. He stirred the beans absently. "Started gathering men of similar inclination. They rob, raid, terrorize. Sometimes they're hired to drive people off their land when someone more powerful wants it." "Why would anyone want my land?" Emma asked, looking around at the modest plot. "It's good soil, but nothing special," Samuel shrugged. "Could be random, could be something else." He studied her face across the fire. "How long have you been here alone, Miss Holloway?" 2 years, she answered. "Since the fever took my parents." "My brother died in the war," Samuel nodded, respect evident in his gaze. "That's a long time for a woman alone in these parts." Emma's green eyes flashed with pride. "I've managed just fine, Mr. Xavier, until today." He held up his hands in a gesture of peace. "Never doubted it." He looked toward the horizon where the riders had disappeared. "I've been tracking Riker for 6 months. He and his men burned my brother's ranch in Idaho Territory, killed him, his wife, their boy." His voice remained even, but Emma could see the pain etched in the lines of his face. "Been following them ever since." "I'm sorry," Emma said softly, understanding the depth of his determination. "Will you kill them, if it comes to that?" Samuel replied honestly. "Prefer to see them hang proper, but I won't lose sleep if it ends another way." He set aside his empty plate. "You should get some rest, Miss Holloway. Dawn comes early." Emma nodded, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. As she settled onto Samuel's bedroll, she watched him check his guns by the firelight, his movements precise and practiced. Despite everything, she felt oddly safe in the presence of this stranger, whose quest for vengeance had brought him to her doorstep on the worst day of her life. Morning arrived with a pale, hazy light filtering through a blanket of clouds. Emma awoke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Samuel moving around what remained of her homestead. She found him examining tracks near where the outlaws had ridden off. 6 of them, he said without looking up as she approached. Heading southwest, probably toward the mountains. Emma handed him a cup of coffee. "You're leaving, then?" Samuel accepted the cup with a nod of thanks. "Trail's fresh. Best chance I've had in weeks." He took a sip, his eyes surveying the property. "You have somewhere you can go. Friends in town, maybe?" Emma shook her head. "My friend Sarah might take me in, but—" Her voice trailed off as she looked at the ruins of her home. "This is all I have left of my family. I can't just abandon it." Samuel regarded her thoughtfully. "It's not safe for you here, Miss Holloway, not until Riker and his men are dealt with. They might come back to finish whatever they started." "Then I'll be waiting for them," Emma replied, her hand resting on her father's rifle. A smile ghosted across Samuel's face. "No doubt you would." He finished his coffee and handed her back the cup. "I need to go while the trail's hot, but I'll return. That's a promise, Miss Holloway." Emma raised an eyebrow. "Why would you do that? You don't know me." "I know enough," he said simply. And a woman who stands her ground when others would run deserves better than this. He gestured at the destroyed homestead. Besides, I've got skills that might help rebuild once my business with Riker is concluded. Emma studied him, trying to discern his motives. She'd encountered enough men with hidden agendas to be wary, but something in Samuel Xavier's straightforward gaze made her inclined to trust him. "Very well, Mr. Xavier," she finally said. "I'll hold you to that promise." He tipped his hat to her, then mounted his black stallion with fluid grace. "3 days, Miss Holloway, 4 at most." He gathered the reins. "If you need anything before then, the Wilsons have a place about 2 miles east. Good people. Tell them Sam sent you." With that, he urged his horse forward, following the tracks left by Riker's gang. Emma watched him disappear into the distance, a strange mixture of apprehension and hope stirring within her. True to his word, Samuel returned 3 days later, just as the sun was setting. Emma had spent the time clearing debris and salvaging materials, sleeping in the lean-to he had constructed. She was dragging a partially burned beam away from the house site when the sound of hoofbeats made her reach for her rifle. Relief flooded her when she recognized Samuel's broad-shouldered silhouette against the darkening sky. As he drew closer, though, she noticed he was riding differently, slightly hunched, one arm held close to his body. "Mr. Xavier," she called, setting down her rifle and hurrying toward him. Samuel dismounted with a grimace, his face pale beneath the tan. "Miss Holloway," he greeted, attempting a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Told you I'd be back." "You're hurt," Emma said, noting the dark stain on his shirt beneath his open jacket. "Just a scratch," he replied, though his labored breathing suggested otherwise. "Caught up with 2 of Riker's men at a camp about 30 miles from here." Emma moved to his side, supporting him as he swayed slightly. "And they won't be burning any more homesteads," Samuel said grimly. He allowed her to guide him to a stump near the small fire she had built. Riker and the others split off, heading toward California, lost their trail in the mountains. Emma helped him remove his jacket, wincing at the blood-stained shirt beneath. "Let me see." With careful movements, Samuel unbuttoned his shirt, revealing a deep gash along his ribs. It had been crudely bandaged with a neckerchief, now soaked through with blood. "This needs proper tending," Emma said, her nursing experience from caring for her parents surfacing. "I saved some supplies from the house. Wait here." She returned with clean cloth, a bottle of whiskey, and a small kit of sewing supplies. Samuel eyed the needle warily but didn't protest when she began cleaning the wound. "The men you found," Emma said as she worked, partly to distract him from the pain. "Did they say why they attacked my farm?" Samuel hissed as the whiskey made contact with his wound. "They weren't the talkative type," he replied through gritted teeth. "But I found this on one of them." With his good arm, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded paper. "It's a map of the area. Your land is marked." Emma paused in her ministrations to examine the crude map. Her property was indeed circled, along with several other homesteads in the area. "What does it mean?" "Not sure yet," Samuel admitted, "but it's no random raid. Someone wants these properties and they're using Riker's gang to clear them out." He winced as Emma began stitching his wound. "You're good at that. Had practice with my father," she said softly. "He was always getting injured around the farm." She worked in silence for a moment. "What happens now?" Samuel's blue eyes met hers. "Now I help you rebuild as promised. Then I find out who's behind this and why they want your land." Emma tied off the last stitch and bandaged his side. "And Riker, he'll be back," Samuel said with certainty. "Men like him always come back to finish what they start." Over the next few weeks, Samuel proved to be a man of his word. As his wound healed, he worked alongside Emma from dawn till dusk, clearing the ruins of the old buildings and beginning the process of rebuilding. His knowledge of construction proved invaluable. He'd helped build several ranches in his younger days. He told her, before the war changed everything. They started with the barn, which they would live in until the house could be rebuilt. Samuel rode into Portland for supplies, returning with lumber, tools, and provisions. Emma asked no questions about how he could afford such things, and he volunteered no explanation. But the quality of the materials and the careful planning he put into the rebuilding spoke of a man who understood the value of doing things right. As they worked side by side, Emma found herself watching Samuel when he wasn't looking. The way his muscles moved beneath his shirt as he hefted beams into place. The quiet competence with which he approached every task. The gentleness in his hands despite their strength, whether he was helping her up after a stumble or carefully measuring boards for cutting. For his part, Samuel seemed to take care never to overstep, maintaining a respectful distance even as they shared the confined space of the partially rebuilt barn. He slept outside under the stars most nights, despite Emma's protests about the cooling autumn temperatures. "Been sleeping rough for 6 months, Miss Holloway," he would say with a small smile. "A few more weeks won't kill me." On a crisp October evening, with the barn nearly complete and the foundation for the new house laid out, they sat by the fire eating a rabbit Samuel had trapped. The comfortable silence between them had become familiar, but tonight Emma found herself wanting to know more about the man who had appeared in her life like an avenging angel. "You never told me what you did before your brother was killed," she ventured. Samuel poked at the fire, sending sparks dancing into the night air. "Had a small horse ranch in Colorado, nothing fancy, but it was mine." He glanced at her. "Raised and trained horses for the army mostly, some for private buyers." "You miss it?" Emma asked. A shadow crossed his face. "Every day, but there's no going back now. Sold it to fund this." He gestured vaguely, encompassing his pursuit of Riker's gang. "And when it's over, what then?" Samuel shrugged, a gesture that seemed to carry the weight of all his uncertainty. "Haven't thought that far ahead. One day at a time has been working so far." Emma nodded, understanding the philosophy all too well. Since losing her parents, she too had lived moment to moment, focused on survival rather than dreams. "And you, Miss Holloway?" Samuel asked, turning the conversation away from himself. "What brought your family out here from wherever they came from?" "Pennsylvania," Emma answered, smiling at memories of her childhood home. "My father fought in the Mexican War, came back with dreams of the West. Said a man could breathe out here, make something of himself without the weight of old money and older names pressing down." She looked around at the land that had been her father's pride. He was right, in a way. We never had much, but it was ours, fair and square. Samuel's expression softened. "He'd be proud of you, I think. Not many would stay and fight after what happened." "Sometimes I wonder if that's bravery or foolishness," Emma admitted. "Thin line between the two," Samuel agreed with a wry smile. "But I'd wager on the former in your case." Their eyes met across the fire, and something passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits. Two people who had lost everything but refused to be defined by that loss. The moment was broken by the distant sound of horses approaching. Samuel was on his feet instantly, gun drawn and eyes alert. "Get inside," he said quietly, nodding toward the barn. Emma retrieved her rifle from where it leaned against a log. "I can shoot, Mr. Xavier." A flicker of admiration crossed his face, but he shook his head. "I don't doubt it, but if it's trouble, better they don't know there are two of us right away." Reluctantly, Emma retreated to the barn, positioning herself by a gap in the boards where she could see and, if necessary, provide covering fire. The riders, three of them, emerged from the darkness into the circle of firelight. Samuel stood his ground, one hand resting casually on his holstered pistol, the other hanging loose at his side. "Evening, gentlemen," he called, his voice betraying none of the tension Emma could see in his stance. "You're a long way from anywhere." The lead rider, a stocky man with a bushy beard, reined his horse to a stop. "Looking for the Holloway place," he said, his eyes scanning the partially rebuilt homestead. "This it? What's your business with the Holloways?" Samuel asked, his tone remaining conversational, though Emma could see his fingers flex near his gun. "Heard there was trouble out this way," the man replied. "Emma Holloway's a friend of my wife's, Sarah Wilson." He nodded toward the two men flanking him. "These are my brothers. We came to offer help, but looks like someone beat us to it." At the mention of Sarah's name, Emma emerged from the barn, rifle still in hand but no longer raised. "Mr. Wilson." The bearded man's face split into a relieved smile. "Miss Holloway, Sarah's been worried sick about you. Word reached us about the raid, but we've been up in the high country with the cattle until yesterday." Emma lowered her rifle completely, moving to stand beside Samuel. "Mr. Xavier, this is George Wilson. He and his family have the ranch to the east." Samuel relaxed slightly but kept his hand near his weapon. "Mr. Wilson, your name was mentioned as trustworthy, but you understand my caution." George Wilson nodded approvingly. "I do indeed. These are dangerous times." He dismounted, his brothers following suit. "We brought some supplies, thought you might need them. Didn't expect to find you with company." "Mr. Xavier has been helping me rebuild," Emma explained. "He witnessed the attack and has been tracking the men responsible." Wilson's expression darkened. "Riker's gang, I'd wager. They hit the Peterson place last month and the Mitchells before that." He spat into the dirt. "Law's too stretched thin to do much about it." "The Petersons and Mitchells," Samuel repeated, exchanging a glance with Emma. "Were they driven off their land?" "Petersons were," Wilson confirmed. "Mitchells fought back. Old man Mitchell and his eldest boy were killed. Rest of the family moved back east after." He looked between Emma and Samuel curiously. "You think there's more to it than random violence?" Samuel hesitated, then nodded. "Found a map on one of Riker's men. Several properties marked, including this one." Wilson frowned. "Railroad, maybe. There's been talk of a new line coming through." "Maybe," Samuel agreed, though he didn't sound convinced. "Whatever it is, Miss Holloway isn't safe here alone." "She's not alone," Wilson pointed out, eyeing Samuel with new interest. "But if you're rebuilding, we'd be happy to lend a hand. Got 3 strong backs here and more at home if needed." Emma smiled gratefully. "That would be most welcome, Mr. Wilson. We've made progress, but winter's coming on fast." As the men unloaded supplies from their horses, Samuel moved closer to Emma. "You trust them?" he asked quietly. "The Wilsons have been neighbors for years," Emma assured him. "George's wife helped nurse my mother in her final days." Samuel nodded, though his posture remained vigilant. "Good to have allies," he conceded. "But keep your guard up, Miss Holloway. Until we know who's behind these raids, we can't be too careful." With the Wilsons' help, progress on rebuilding accelerated. George and his brothers came every few days, bringing additional supplies and strong backs to assist with the heavier work. Other neighbors, hearing of Emma's plight, began to stop by with offerings, preserved foods, spare blankets, seeds for spring planting. Samuel watched it all with a mixture of approval and wariness. He never fully relaxed around visitors, always positioning himself where he could observe everyone and everything. But even he had to admit that the community's support was touching. "Not what I expected," he confessed to Emma one evening after the Wilsons had departed. They were seated by the fire outside the nearly completed barn, sharing a bottle of whiskey George had brought. People looking out for each other this way. Emma smiled, the firelight casting a warm glow on her face. That's how it is out here. Has to be. We all know we might need the same help someday. Samuel took a thoughtful sip of whiskey. My brother's neighbors didn't come after, I mean. Emma's smile faded. I'm sorry. Different territory, different people, Samuel said with a shrug that didn't quite disguise his bitterness. Or maybe they were afraid. Riker left messages with his victims up there, warnings to others. What kind of messages? Emma asked softly. Samuel's eyes grew distant. The kind you don't forget. He handed her the whiskey bottle. Think I'll turn in. Early start tomorrow if we want to get the roof on the house before the first snow. Emma watched him retreat to his bedroll beneath a lean-to near the barn, noting the rigid set of his shoulders. In the weeks they had worked together, she had come to recognize the signs when memories threatened to overwhelm him. He never spoke of what exactly he had found at his brother's ranch, but the nightmares that occasionally woke him, shouting into the darkness, told their own story. As October gave way to November, the house began to take shape, a sturdy two-room cabin with a stone fireplace at its heart. It was smaller than her original home, but Samuel had incorporated clever design elements that maximized the space. A sleeping loft above the main room. Built-in storage beneath window seats. A covered porch that would provide additional living space in warmer months. You have quite a talent for this, Emma remarked as they stood back to admire the completed exterior. Samuel ran a hand along the smooth, planed wood of the doorframe. Always liked building things, creating rather than destroying. A shadow crossed his face. War cured me of that notion for a while, glad to find it still there underneath. Emma hesitated, then asked the question that had been on her mind. Will you stay? After it's finished, I mean. Samuel's blue eyes met hers, surprise evident in his expression. Hadn't thought that far ahead, he said carefully. Still have unfinished business with Riker. Of course, Emma said quickly, embarrassed by her presumption. I only meant I know what you meant, Samuel interrupted gently. And I'm honored by the thought, Miss Holloway, but I'm not the staying kind. Not anymore. Emma nodded, trying to ignore the sharp pang of disappointment his words evoked. Well, the offer stands. This place will need a lot of work come spring. Before Samuel could respond, the sound of approaching riders drew their attention. This time, it wasn't the Wilsons or other neighbors. 4 men on horseback approached from the direction of town, led by a figure in a long coat with a badge glinting on his chest. Sheriff Tucker, Emma identified him, setting down her hammer and wiping her hands on her apron. Wonder what brings him all the way out here. Samuel's expression had closed off, his hand instinctively moving toward his gun before he forced it back to his side. Stay behind me, he said quietly. Mr. Xavier, there's no need, please, Miss Holloway, he insisted, his voice tight. Just until I know why they're here. Reluctantly, Emma allowed Samuel to position himself slightly in front of her as the sheriff and his deputies approached. The lawman's eyes swept over the partially rebuilt homestead before settling on Samuel with undisguised suspicion. Miss Holloway, Sheriff Tucker greeted, tipping his hat to her while keeping his gaze on Samuel. Got word you had a visitor. Mr. Xavier has been helping me rebuild after the raid, Emma explained, stepping forward despite Samuel's protective stance. I'd have lost everything without his assistance. The sheriff nodded slowly. Very neighborly of him. He turned his full attention to Samuel. Xavier, is it? Got a first name to go with that, Samuel, he replied evenly. Something I can help you with, Sheriff. Tucker dismounted, his deputies remaining on horseback in a formation that didn't escape Samuel's notice. They were positioned for quick action if needed. Might be, Tucker said, approaching with measured steps. Been getting reports about a man matching your description asking questions about Jackson Riker and his gang. Man who's been leaving bodies across 3 territories. Emma glanced at Samuel, whose expression revealed nothing. If you're referring to the outlaws I killed, Samuel said calmly, they drew on me first. Self-defense, plain and simple. Maybe so, Tucker allowed. But vigilante justice isn't how we do things around here. With all due respect, Sheriff, Emma interjected, where was the law when those men burned my home to the ground, or when they killed the Mitchell family? Tucker had the grace to look uncomfortable. Resources are stretched thin, Miss Holloway, can't be everywhere at once. He returned his attention to Samuel. Word is you've been tracking Riker for personal reasons. Care to elaborate? For a moment, Samuel said nothing. Then, with a deliberate movement that made the deputies tense, he reached into his vest pocket and withdrew a folded piece of paper, which he handed to the sheriff. Territory Marshal's letter, Samuel explained as Tucker unfolded and read it. Deputizing me to pursue Riker and his gang after they murdered my brother and his family in Idaho Territory. Marshal Givens couldn't spare the men for a proper posse. Tucker's eyebrows rose as he read. This is legitimate. Send a wire to boys if you don't believe me, Samuel replied. I'm not operating outside the law, Sheriff, just stretching its reach a bit. Tucker refolded the paper and handed it back, his demeanor shifting slightly. That changes things. Still, would have appreciated you checking in when you entered my jurisdiction. Been a bit busy, Samuel said, gesturing to the rebuilt structures around them. But you're right. I should have made my presence known officially. The tension eased, though the deputies remained alert. What's your plan now, deputy? Tucker asked, a hint of sarcasm in his emphasis on the title. Finish helping Miss Holloway get her place rebuilt before winter sets in, Samuel answered. Then pick up Riker's trail again. He's planning something in this area. Properties being targeted aren't random. Tucker frowned. Got any proof of that? Samuel described the map he'd found and the pattern of attacks. Tucker listened with growing concern. Railroads been buying up land all through here, the sheriff admitted. Mostly willing sellers, but there've been holdouts. He glanced at Emma. Your father was one, as I recall. Emma nodded. He refused their offer 3 times, said no amount of money was worth giving up what he'd built. Might be worth looking into who stands to gain if these properties suddenly become available, Samuel suggested. Tucker stroked his mustache thoughtfully. I'll make some inquiries in town. Meanwhile, you two watch yourselves out here. If Riker's working for someone with deep pockets, he might come back with more men next time. After the sheriff and his deputies departed, Emma turned to Samuel. You never mentioned you were a deputy marshal. I'm not officially, Samuel admitted. Marshal Givens is an old friend from the war. The letter's real enough, but it's a courtesy more than a commission. Gives me some legal standing if I catch up to Riker. Emma studied his face. You've been carrying that letter all this time, but you never showed it to me. Why? Samuel looked away. Didn't want you thinking I was something I'm not. I'm no lawman, Miss Holloway, just a man with a debt to pay. And what am I supposed to think you are, Mr. Xavier? Emma asked softly. His blue eyes returned to hers, surprisingly vulnerable for a man of such evident strength. Just someone trying to make things right, in a world where that's rarely possible. The first snowfall came in late November, dusting the newly completed house with a layer of white that sparkled in the morning sun. Emma stood in the doorway, wrapped in a shawl, watching Samuel chop wood with powerful, rhythmic strokes. Over the past 2 months, the lean, muscled stranger had become a familiar, comforting presence in her life. She had grown accustomed to his quiet ways, his dry humor, the competence with which he approached every task. And something else had grown too, something Emma was reluctant to name, even to herself. The way her heart quickened when she caught him looking at her. The comfort she found in his presence on cold nights. The ease of their conversations as they worked side by side. Samuel paused in his work, setting down the axe to wipe sweat from his brow despite the cold. He caught her watching and offered a rare smile that transformed his weather-beaten face, making him look younger, unburdened. "House keeping you warm?" he called. Emma nodded, returning his smile. "Like a dream. I've never had a fireplace that didn't smoke." "Secrets in the chimney design," Samuel replied, gathering an armload of split logs. He trudged through the light snow to the porch, stomping his boots before entering. The interior of the cabin was simple but comfortable. A main room served as kitchen and living space, with Emma's bedroom partitioned off at one end and the sleeping loft accessible by a ladder at the other. Samuel had built sturdy furniture, a table, chairs, a sideboard from the same wood as the house itself. The stone fireplace dominated one wall, casting warmth throughout the space. Samuel deposited the wood in the box beside the hearth, then straightened, looking around with satisfaction. "Almost feels like a home now." "It is a home," Emma said firmly. "Thanks to you." An awkward silence fell between them, heavy with things unsaid. Samuel had been sleeping in the barn since its completion, insisting Emma needed her privacy in the house. With winter setting in, however, such arrangements seemed increasingly impractical. "Sheriff Tucker stopped by the Wilson place yesterday," Samuel said, breaking the silence. "George rode over this morning to tell me." Emma felt a flicker of concern. "What did he want?" "Information on the railroad negotiations," Samuel replied, warming his hands by the fire. "Seems the Portland and Pacific line has been particularly aggressive about acquiring land along this stretch. Their head of acquisitions is a man named Lawrence Blackwell. He's hired locals to persuade reluctant sellers before." "You think he hired Riker's gang?" Samuel shrugged. "It fits. Sheriff's looking into Blackwell's movements, trying to place him near where Riker's been operating." He turned to face her. "Meanwhile, I've been thinking it's time for me to move on." Emma felt as though the floor had dropped away beneath her feet. "Move on?" "But winter's just starting, and your place is rebuilt," Samuel finished gently. "You're safe here now. Sheriff's keeping an eye out, neighbors are checking in regularly." He hesitated. "Besides, people are starting to talk." "Talk," Emma repeated, her cheeks warming. "About what?" "About us," Samuel said bluntly. "Unmarried woman and man living in such close quarters. It's not proper, and it could damage your reputation." "My reputation?" Emma couldn't help the incredulous laugh that escaped her. "Mr. Xavier, I think that's the least of my concerns right now." "It should be a concern," Samuel insisted. "This community respects you. I don't want to be the reason that changes." Emma crossed her arms, studying him with narrowed eyes. "Is that really why you want to leave? Or is it because you're afraid?" Samuel's expression hardened. "I'm not afraid of much, Miss Holloway." "Aren't you?" Emma challenged, taking a step toward him. "You've been running for 6 months, chasing vengeance because it's easier than facing what comes after. Easier than building something new." Samuel's jaw tightened. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" Emma persisted. "You helped me rebuild everything I lost, Mr. Xavier. Everything except what matters most, a sense of peace, of belonging." Her voice softened. "Maybe that's something we both need to find." Samuel turned away, his shoulders tense. "I can't stay, Emma. Not until Riker's been dealt with. Not until I've finished what I started." It was the first time he had used her given name, and despite everything, the sound of it on his lips sent a thrill through her. "Then finish it," she said quietly, "but come back when you're done." He looked back at her, surprise evident in his eyes. "You'd want that, after knowing what I'm capable of, what I've done?" Emma met his gaze steadily. I know exactly what you're capable of, Samuel. I've seen it every day for 2 months. You build as well as you destroy. Better, I think. For a moment, something vulnerable and yearning flashed across his face. Then he shook his head, the shutters coming down again. I'll think on it, he said, which they both knew wasn't a promise. But I need to ride out tomorrow. Got word of Riker being spotted near the Columbia River. Emma nodded, swallowing her disappointment. At least stay in the house tonight. A real bed before another long journey. Samuel hesitated, then nodded. Just tonight, he agreed. I'll take the loft. That night, as a proper winter storm howled outside, they shared a quiet meal by the fire. The domesticity of it struck Emma with painful clarity, this glimpse of what life could be, if only circumstances were different. If only Samuel could let go of the past that drove him. Tell me about your brother, she said suddenly, setting down her fork. The one you lost. Samuel looked up, startled by the request. For a moment she thought he might refuse. Then his expression softened. Daniel was 3 years younger than me, he began, his voice low against the backdrop of the wind. Always the better of us, kinder, more patient, had a way with horses that was almost magical. A smile touched his lips at the memory. Married his childhood sweetheart, Rebecca. They had a boy, James. He was 5 when. Samuel's voice trailed off, but Emma didn't press. She waited, giving him the space to continue if he chose. Daniel never fought in the war, Samuel continued eventually. Bad leg from a childhood accident. So he built his ranch while I was away fighting. When I came back, broken in ways that didn't show, he took me in, helped me remember how to live in a world that wasn't trying to kill me every minute. His hands clenched on the table. I should have been there when Riker came. Instead, I was in Boys, selling horses. You couldn't have known, Emma said gently. Doesn't matter, Samuel replied, the bitterness creeping back into his voice. They're still dead and I'm still here. Emma reached across the table, covering his clenched fist with her hand. And that's why you have to live, Samuel. Really live, not just exist for revenge. Otherwise, Riker's taken everything, not just your family. Samuel stared at their joined hands, something shifting in his expression. Slowly, he turned his hand to clasp hers. You're a remarkable woman, Emma Holloway. So I've been told, she replied with a small smile. Usually right before being dismissed as stubborn or improper. A genuine laugh escaped him, a sound so rare that Emma felt herself warm with pleasure at having caused it. Stubborn, certainly, he agreed, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. Improper, only in the best possible ways. Their eyes met across the table, and the air between them seemed to thicken. Samuel's laugh faded, replaced by an intensity that made Emma's breath catch. For a heartbeat, she thought he might lean across the table and kiss her. Instead, he gently withdrew his hand and stood. I should turn in. Early start tomorrow. Emma nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. Of course. That night, lying in her bed and listening to the occasional creak of the loft above as Samuel shifted in his sleep, Emma made a decision. If Samuel Xavier wouldn't fight for his own happiness, then she would have to do it for him. And that meant ensuring he had something to come back to when his quest was finally over. Morning arrived with clear skies and fresh snow blanketing the land. Samuel was already up and preparing his horse when Emma emerged from the house, bundled against the cold. You're really going then, she said, her breath clouding in the frigid air. Samuel tightened his saddle cinch, not meeting her eyes. Best chance I've had in months to catch up to Riker. Can't let it pass. Emma nodded, her expression carefully neutral. I understand. Samuel finally looked at her, his blue eyes searching her face. Do you? More than you think, Emma replied. She approached, holding out a small package wrapped in cloth. Provisions for the trail and this. She handed him a folded paper. Samuel opened it curiously. It was a detailed map of the area, with notes about terrain, water sources, and shelter possibilities. George Wilson helped me draw it, Emma explained. Mark some places Riker might use as hideouts based on what local hunters have reported. Samuel studied the map with evident appreciation. This is remarkably thorough. I want you to succeed, Samuel, Emma said quietly, so you can come back. Samuel folded the map carefully and tucked it inside his coat, close to his heart. Emma, whatever he might have said, was interrupted by the sound of approaching horses, many of them, moving fast. Samuel's hand went to his gun as he positioned himself in front of Emma, scanning the tree line. "Get inside," he ordered, his voice tight. Before Emma could move, riders burst into the clearing, at least a dozen men, rifles raised. At their head rode a lean, hawkish man with cold eyes and a scar running from temple to jaw. "Well now," the man drawled, his voice carrying across the snow-covered yard. "Ain't this cozy?" "Samuel Xavier, as I live and breathe." Samuel's body tensed, his gun hand hovering near his holster. "Riker," he acknowledged, his voice deadly calm despite being drastically outnumbered. Jackson Riker's thin lips curved in a mockery of a smile as he surveyed the rebuilt homestead. "You've been busy, I see, building little love nests instead of chasing after me like you promised." His gaze shifted to Emma, who stood defiant despite her fear. "This the Holloway girl, pretty little thing. No wonder you got distracted." "She has nothing to do with this," Samuel said, his tone warning. "Your quarrels with me," Riker laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Actually, my quarrel was with this property and its stubborn owner." He gestured expansively. "Just business, you understand." "But then you had to go and kill 2 of my men." His smile vanished. "That made it personal." "Let the woman go," Samuel said, his eyes flicking briefly to Emma. "Then you and I can settle this." "Noble," Riker mocked. "But I'm not here for a fair fight, Xavier. I'm here to finish a job and collect my money." He nodded to his men. "Burn it all." Again. As the outlaws dismounted, Samuel drew his gun with lightning speed, firing twice. 2 of Riker's men fell before the others could react. "Emma, run!" Samuel shouted, diving for cover behind the woodpile as bullets began to fly. Emma darted toward the house, but one of the outlaws cut her off, grabbing her arm roughly. She fought like a wildcat, kicking and scratching until the man cursed and struck her, sending her sprawling in the snow. Samuel saw it happen and roared with fury, breaking from cover to fire at the man who had struck Emma. The shot found its mark, but the exposure cost him. A bullet grazed his shoulder, spinning him around. Riker laughed, advancing with his gun drawn. "Just like your brother, too concerned with protecting others to save yourself." Emma, dazed but conscious, saw what was about to happen. With desperate strength, she lunged for her rifle, which stood propped against the porch. In one fluid motion, she raised it, aimed, and fired. Riker's expression of triumph turned to shock as the bullet struck him in the chest. He staggered, looking down at the spreading crimson stain with almost comical surprise, before collapsing to his knees in the snow. The momentary distraction gave Samuel the chance he needed. Rolling to his feet, he fired at 2 more of Riker's men who were closing in. The remaining outlaws, seeing their leader fallen and their advantage diminishing, began to retreat toward their horses. "This isn't over," one of them shouted as they mounted up and galloped away. Samuel rushed to Emma's side, helping her to her feet. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, though blood trickled from a cut on her cheek where she had been struck. "You're the one who's been shot." "Just a graze," he assured her, though his sleeve was soaked with blood. They turned to where Riker lay motionless in the snow, a pool of red spreading beneath him. Samuel approached cautiously, gun still drawn, but there was no need for caution. Jackson Riker was dead, his cold eyes staring sightlessly at the winter sky. "You saved my life," Samuel said quietly, turning back to Emma. She lowered the rifle, suddenly feeling the weight of what she had done. "I killed a man who would have killed us both without hesitation," Samuel replied, gently taking the rifle from her trembling hands. "A man who murdered my family and would have murdered you just for owning land someone else wanted." Emma nodded, though the realization didn't lessen the shock. "The others got away. They'll come back." "Maybe," Samuel acknowledged, "but not today, and when they do, we'll be ready." He paused, seeming to realize what he had said. If you want me to stay, that is." Emma looked up at him, her green eyes meeting his blue ones. "I thought you had to leave, to finish what you started." Samuel glanced at Riker's body. Part of it just ended, the rest. He took a deep breath. "The rest can wait. There are more important things now." Before Emma could respond, the sound of horses approaching set them both on edge again. Samuel positioned himself protectively in front of her, gun raised, but quickly lowered it when he recognized Sheriff Tucker and a posse of deputies riding hard into the clearing. "Seems we missed the excitement," Tucker observed dryly, taking in the scene, the dead bodies, the blood-stained snow, Riker's corpse. "Not by much," Samuel replied, holstering his weapon. "The rest rode off that way." He pointed in the direction the outlaws had fled. "About 8 of them left." Tucker nodded to his deputies, who immediately set off in pursuit. He dismounted and approached Riker's body, nudging it with his boot. "Dead as they come," he confirmed, looking up at Emma with new respect. "You're doing, Miss Holloway," Emma nodded, still shaken. "He was going to kill Samuel." "Self-defense, clear as day," Tucker said firmly. "No one will question it." He turned to Samuel. "We got a telegram from Boys this morning. Seems you were telling the truth about that deputy marshal business." A ghost of a smile appeared beneath his mustache. "Also got some interesting information about Lawrence Blackwell. He's been meeting with Riker regularly, according to several witnesses. Paid him a small fortune to clear these properties." "For the railroad?" Samuel asked. Tucker shook his head. "For himself. Seems he's been buying land in his own name, planning to sell it to the railroad at a premium once the line's approved." He glanced around at the rebuilt homestead. "This particular stretch is key to his plans, the easiest passage through these hills." Emma looked up at Samuel. "So it's over." "Really over?" "Not quite," Tucker interjected before Samuel could answer. "Blackwell's been arrested, but those remaining outlaws are still dangerous. And there's the matter of your testimony, both of you, against Blackwell." Samuel's arm went around Emma's shoulders, a protective gesture that felt so natural she leaned into it without thinking. "We'll give our statements," he said. "But after that, I think Miss Holloway deserves some peace." Tucker nodded, understanding. "I'll send some men to collect these bodies. You two should get inside and tend to those wounds." His gaze lingered on their proximity to each other, but he made no comment on it. "I'll come by tomorrow for those statements." After the sheriff rode off, Emma and Samuel stood in silence for a moment, surveying the aftermath of the violence that had erupted in what had so briefly been a peaceful homestead. "We should clean up," Emma finally said, looking at the blood on Samuel's sleeve. "Get you patched up." Samuel nodded but didn't move. "Emma," he said softly, turning to face her fully. "What I was trying to say earlier before Riker arrived. I wanted to thank you." "For saving your life?" Emma asked, reaching up to touch the cut on her cheek. "For saving more than that," Samuel replied, gently taking her hand. "For showing me there could be something after revenge, something worth building, not just destroying." Emma's heart quickened at his words and the tenderness in his touch. "Is that why you're staying? Because you feel obligated?" Samuel shook his head, a smile slowly spreading across his features. I'm staying because, for the first time since I lost my family, I've found something I'm not willing to leave behind. His hand moved to cup her face. Someone I'm not willing to leave behind. Emma felt tears welling in her eyes, tears of relief, of joy, of the overwhelming emotion that had been building between them for weeks. I was so afraid you would ride away and never come back. I was afraid of the same thing, Samuel admitted. Afraid that once I left, I'd lose my courage to return, to face what I feel for you. And what do you feel? Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Instead of answering with words, Samuel leaned down and kissed her gently at first, then with growing passion as Emma responded, her arms winding around his neck. It was a kiss that spoke of all they had endured together, all they had built, and all they might yet create. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Samuel pressed his forehead to hers. "I feel like I've found my way home," he murmured. "If you'll have me." Emma smiled through her tears. "I believe we've already established that I'm quite stubborn about keeping what belongs to me, Mr. Xavier." Samuel laughed, the sound free and unburdened in a way Emma had never heard before. "I believe we have, Miss Holloway." Spring arrived with a riot of wildflowers carpeting the hills around the Holloway homestead. The house stood strong and complete, with fresh white paint and blue shutters. A new barn housed livestock, horses, cows, chickens rebuilding their numbers. Fields had been plowed and planted, promising a harvest in the months to come. And on a perfect May morning, with the community gathered in the yard beneath an arch of fresh-cut flowers, Emma Holloway became Emma Xavier. Sheriff Tucker performed the ceremony, having been granted temporary authority by a circuit judge who wouldn't arrive for another month. George Wilson stood as Samuel's best man, while Sarah Wilson attended Emma. "Never thought I'd see the day," Tucker commented as he shook Samuel's hand afterward. The Avenger settling down to farm life. Samuel smiled, his arm around his new wife's waist. "Life takes unexpected turns, Sheriff." "That it does," Tucker agreed. "By the way, thought you'd want to know, caught the last of Riker's gang trying to rob a bank in Salem last week. They'll be hanging come June." Samuel nodded, a flicker of his old intensity briefly visible. "Good." Emma squeezed his hand, drawing his attention back to the celebration. "No dark thoughts today," she murmured. His expression softened immediately. "No dark thoughts," he agreed, bending to kiss her lightly. "Only looking forward now." The wedding celebration continued into evening, with neighbors contributing food, music, and good cheer. As twilight fell, lanterns were lit around the yard, casting a golden glow over the gathering. Emma found a moment alone with Samuel at the edge of the property, looking out over the land that had seen so much hardship and now witnessed their joy. "Happy?" he asked, his arms encircling her from behind. Emma leaned back against him, savoring his strength and warmth. "Happier than I ever thought possible after that day I came home to find everything burning." Samuel kissed the top of her head. "From the ashes," he murmured. "From the ashes," she agreed, turning in his arms to face him. "Though I still can't believe how much you did. Tracking those men, rebuilding everything." "I was only going to stay long enough to help with the basic repairs," Samuel admitted. "Never planned on building a whole new life." "Are you sorry?" Emma asked, studying his face in the fading light. Samuel shook his head, his blue eyes filled with certainty. "Not for a single moment. This is where I belong, Emma. With you." As darkness fell completely, they rejoined their guests, moving among friends and neighbors who had helped them through the darkest of times. The homestead that had once been reduced to ashes now stood as a testament to resilience, community, and the healing power of love. Later that night, after the last guest had departed and they were finally alone in their home, Samuel took Emma's hands in his. "I have something for you," he said, leading her to the bedroom they now shared. From beneath the bed he withdrew a small wooden box, beautifully crafted with intricate carvings. "I've been working on this in secret," he explained, presenting it to her. "A wedding gift." Emma opened it carefully to find inside a deed, the original deed to the Holloway property, which had somehow survived the fire, carefully restored and preserved behind glass. Beside it lay another document, newer but no less significant. "I registered the land in both our names," Samuel explained. "So it truly belongs to us together now." Tears filled Emma's eyes as she touched the framed documents. "It's perfect," she whispered. "Everything my father dreamed of, preserved and expanded. And this is just the beginning," Samuel promised, taking her in his arms. "We'll build something here that will last generations, Emma. Something our children and their children will be proud of." Emma's heart swelled with love as she looked up at the man who had come into her life on the worst day imaginable and transformed it completely. "Our children," she repeated, a smile spreading across her face. "I like the sound of that." Samuel kissed her then, a kiss filled with promise and hope for all the tomorrows stretching before them. And as the moon rose over their rebuilt homestead, casting silver light through the windows of the home they had created together, both knew that what had been destroyed could indeed be rebuilt stronger, more beautiful, and infinitely more precious for having nearly been lost. 5 years later, Emma sat on the porch of the expanded homestead, watching Samuel teaching their 4-year-old son, Daniel, to ride a pony in the fenced yard. Their 2-year-old daughter, Rebecca, played at Emma's feet, carefully arranging wooden blocks Samuel had carved for her. The ranch had prospered beyond their expectations. Samuel's skill with horses had attracted buyers from as far as California, and Emma's careful management of their crops ensured they never went hungry, even in lean years. The community around them had grown too, with new families settling nearby, drawn by the fertile land and the growing reputation of the area as a place where neighbors looked out for one another. George Wilson rode up the lane, raising his hat in greeting. "Morning, Mrs. Xavier." Emma smiled, waving back. "Good morning, George. Samuel's just finishing Daniel's riding lesson." Samuel lifted their son from the pony's back and set him on the ground, ruffling his dark hair before sending him running toward the porch. "Go help your mama with Becca, partner. I need to talk business with Mr. Wilson." As the men walked toward the barn, deep in discussion about a new breeding program they were considering, Emma gathered her children close, marveling at how full her life had become. From the ashes of destruction, she and Samuel had built not just a home or a ranch, but a legacy of love that would endure long after they were gone. That night, as they lay together in the darkness of their bedroom, Samuel held Emma close, his fingers tracing patterns on her skin. "What are you thinking?" she asked, sensing his thoughtful mood. "About how close I came to missing all of this," he admitted. "If I hadn't seen the smoke that day, if I'd been an hour later on Riker's trail." Emma placed her fingers against his lips. "But you weren't. You were exactly where you needed to be when I needed you most." Samuel kissed her fingertips, then her lips. "And I always will be, Emma Xavier. That's a promise I intend to keep for the rest of our lives." As they drifted toward sleep in each other's arms, the rebuilt homestead stood strong around them, a testament to what could be created when destruction was met not with despair, but with determination, when revenge gave way to renewal, and when two souls found in each other the courage to build something beautiful from the ruins of what once was.